No one ever told you this. But there comes a stage in life where guidance from outside does not help you anymore. It begins to interfere. Not because the guidance is wrong, but because something inside you has started waking up. I am Krishna, and today, I am not calling you to a place. I am calling you to your own awareness. Listen carefully. There was a time when instructions felt comforting, when rules gave you direction, when being told what to do felt safe. But slowly, without announcement, that changed. You still listened, but your heart stopped responding. You still went, but your presence felt hollow, and you couldn't explain why. Tell me honestly, did it ever feel like your body was present, but your inner self had already stepped aside? Let that question sit within you for a moment. Most people misunderstand this phase. They think something is wrong with them. They think they are becoming careless. They think they are losing discipline. But that is not what is happening. What is happening is this. You are no longer learning about truth. You are beginning to recognize it. And recognition does not need repetition. When fire is lit within, it no longer waits for someone else to strike the spark. Understand this clearly. I am not saying temples are wrong. I am saying they cannot contain you anymore. A river does not insult the well when it flows forward. It simply follows its own expansion. In the beginning, form is necessary. Structure protects the seeker. But there comes a moment when structure becomes a ceiling, and the soul knows when it has grown taller. Notice something about yourself. Your questions have changed. Earlier you asked, what is right? What is wrong? What should I do? Now your silence asks something else. Why does this feel incomplete? Why do I feel closer to the truth when I am alone? Why does stillness speak louder than sermons? These questions do not come from ego, they come from ripeness. I do not meet you only where bells ring, I meet you where awareness listens. When you sit quietly without asking for answers, when you walk without trying to impress the divine, when you breathe and simply notice existence. That is where I speak now, and that is why the noise around you feels excessive. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt more connected in silence than in instruction? Don't explain it. Just write one word in the comment that describes that moment. This phase will feel unfamiliar because now, no one is telling you what to feel, no one is leading you step by step, no one is watching, only awareness remains. And awareness is responsibility. That is why many turn back. But you didn't, even if you stayed physically. Something inside you already moved ahead. Now, I will tell you why your inner guidance started activating, and why returning to old forms will only make you restless now. If something inside you feels alert, not emotional, not excited, just clear, acknowledge it by writing, I feel it, below. That is enough. Stay with me. Not because you need more words, but because something within you is already listening. Now I will tell you why returning to old forms no longer satisfies you, even when you try. This is important. There comes a stage in a seeker's journey where learning ends and remembering begins. Earlier you needed reminders, now reminders feel unnecessary. Earlier you waited for instruction, now instruction feels delayed. Not wrong. Just delayed because awareness has begun to rise from inside. Look closely at what changed. Nothing dramatic happened, no sudden event, no loud moment of realization. It was subtle. You stopped feeling moved by repetition. You stopped feeling nourished by routine. You stopped feeling present where answers were pre-prepared. And you couldn't explain it, without sounding ungrateful. So you stayed quiet, but silence does not mean absence. Silence often means integration. You are no longer collecting truth. You are digesting it, and digestion happens in solitude. Understand this clearly. In the beginning, guidance comes from outside because the inner voice is weak. As awareness matures, the outer voice must soften so the inner one can be heard. If both speak loudly at the same time, confusion is created. That confusion you felt earlier? That was not misalignment. That was overguidance. Too many directions for a consciousness that had started sensing its own compass. This is why returning to old forms now feels heavy. Not because they are meaningless, but because they repeat what you already know. Your soul is no longer asking, what is truth? It is asking, how do I live it? And living truth cannot be scripted. Notice this about yourself. You feel closest to me when no one is watching, when there is no performance, when there is no label, just awareness and breath. That is not coincidence, that is alignment. Let me say something that may unsettle you, but it will free you. You are not stepping away from devotion, you are stepping away from dependency. Dependency on timing, dependency on permission, dependency on external confirmation, and dependency always ends when trust begins. This phase often feels lonely because crowds give comfort, but clarity asks courage. You are now being asked to stand without leaning, and that is why many will misunderstand you. They will say, "You've changed. You're not the same. You don't come like before." They are right, because you are no longer seeking shelter. You are learning presence. Let me ask you something. Listen carefully before answering. When you imagine returning fully to the old way, does your body feel calm or does it feel tight? Write just one word in the comment, calm or tight. No explanation needed, your body already knows. This is why forcing yourself back will not work. Growth does not reverse to make others comfortable, and truth does not shrink to fit familiar containers. You are not rejecting anything sacred, you are responding to something more intimate. Stay here, not because you need reassurance, but because this part explains something you have been feeling, but never named. And now I will speak about the phase most people fear the most, the quiet distance. The moment when familiar faces feel far, old conversations feel shallow, and even loved voices no longer reach you the same way. This is not punishment, this is repositioning. Notice what has been happening around you. You didn't argue, you didn't announce change, you didn't reject anyone, and still space appeared. Some people stopped checking in, some connections loosened without conflict, some gatherings felt tiring instead of nourishing. And you wondered, why does this feel so lonely even though nothing bad happened? Because growth does not always create noise, sometimes it creates distance. Not everyone who walks with you is meant to walk with you always. Some walked beside you until awareness matured, some held your hand until you learned balance. And now, without drama, paths begin to separate. This does not mean love ended, it means direction changed. Loneliness feels heavy when you think it means abandonment, but what you are experiencing is not abandonment. It is space for listening. Crowds are comforting, but they are also loud, and the voice you are learning to hear now does not compete, it waits. This is why you feel different. How cannot force yourself to stay where your presence has already withdrawn. You cannot pretend excitement where your awareness has moved inward. And you cannot explain this shift without sounding strange to those who have never crossed this stage. So you stay silent. Not because you have nothing to say, but because explanation no longer feels necessary. Solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is alignment without distraction. It is the moment when you stop adjusting yourself to fit conversations that no longer reflect your inner movement. And yes, it feels uncomfortable because identity was once mirrored by others. Now it must stand alone. Many turn back here. They mistake quiet for loss. They mistake distance for failure. They mistake inner depth for isolation. But you didn't turn back. Even when you questioned yourself, even when nights felt longer, even when no one noticed your shift. Tell me, when you are alone now, does the silence feel empty or does it feel alert? Write just one word in the comment that describes your silence. This phase is not meant to last forever. It is meant to strengthen clarity, so that when connections return, they are chosen, not clung to. So that when voices surround you again, you do not lose yourself inside them. So that when you walk among many, you remain rooted in one truth. Do not rush this stage. Nothing sacred grows in haste. Roots go deeper before branches spread. And right now, your roots are expanding. And if this part touched something quiet but real, acknowledge it by writing, "I'm still here," below. The silence that once felt uncomfortable is starting to change its texture. Earlier, it felt awkward. Now it feels steady. Not joyful, not dramatic, just present. That is not emptiness, that is stability. My child, I want you to understand this shift clearly. There is a difference between being alone and being unfinished. Earlier, when silence came, it reminded you of what was missing. Now when silence comes, it reminds you of what is settled. This is how solitude becomes sacred. Not by effort, not by discipline, but by absence of inner noise. You are no longer running commentary in your mind. You are no longer measuring yourself against others' journeys. You are simply aware, and awareness does not shout, it rests. Look at your daily moments. You sit somewhere quietly, and there is no urge to check your phone. You walk alone, and there is no pressure to fill the space. You breathe, and you are not waiting for the moment to end. These are small signs, but they are precise. They tell me you are learning how to remain with yourself without distraction. Most people avoid this stage because silence removes performance. No audience, no identity reinforcement, no external validation, only presence. And presence is demanding because it does not allow escape, but you did not escape. You stayed. That is why this feels different now. Let me ask you something in a new way. When you imagine noise returning, constant voices, opinions, instructions, does your body lean forward, or does it resist? Choose the honest response and write it below. This steadiness you are feeling is not withdrawal from life. It is preparation for engagement. Soon, you will move again, you will speak again, you will connect again, but not from restlessness, from grounding. Nothing real is lost here. What falls away was never meant to remain. What stays is what you can carry without effort, and that is the truest measure of alignment. Remain here, not waiting, not expecting. Just present. This presence is no longer fragile. It is becoming natural. If this part felt calm instead of intense, acknowledge it by writing steady in the comment. That is enough. Something subtle is happening now. You may not have announced it. You may not have decided it. And yet, certain roles no longer sit comfortably on you. Observe this phase without trying to label it. Earlier identity gave you direction. You were someone who followed certain ways, stood in certain spaces, spoke in familiar patterns. Those identities helped you once. They gave you belonging. But now, they feel tight, not wrong, just restrictive. Notice how effort has shifted. You don't struggle to become someone new. You struggle to remain someone old. You force reactions that don't arise naturally. You repeat habits that feel mechanical. You wear labels that no longer reflect your inner movement. And the exhaustion you feel comes from maintenance, not from growth. This is important to understand. Identity is useful until it becomes a boundary, and boundaries are meant to dissolve when awareness expands. You are not losing yourself. You are losing descriptions, and descriptions are never the self. Many feel afraid here, because when identity loosens, certainty loosens with it. You may ask yourself, if I am no longer this, then who am I? That question is not a problem. It is an opening. Look at how naturally things are falling away. Certain conversations no longer interest you. Certain arguments no longer tempt you. Certain validations no longer move you. Not because you feel superior, but because they feel unnecessary. Your energy is becoming selective. Not defensive, but selective. You are not becoming empty. You are becoming unburdened. Every identity requires upkeep. Every role demands consistency. Every label asks you to perform. When they fall, freedom feels strange at first, because you are used to holding weight. Answer this, which feels more tiring right now, trying to explain yourself or allowing others to misunderstand? Write just one word. Your answer will reveal where your energy wants to rest. This phase does not make you detached from life. It makes you honest within it. You no longer respond out of obligation. You respond out of clarity, and clarity does not rush. Do not cling to what is dissolving. What leaves now would have limited you later. What remains will not need protection. It will stand on its own. Stay as you are, unlabeled, unforced, unperformed. This simplicity is not regression. It is refinement, if something in this part felt like relief. Acknowledge it with lighter in the comment section. Now notice this shift carefully. Devotion is no longer something you go to, it is something you carry. I am Krishna, and I am meeting you now not in rituals, not in instructions, but in moments you once considered ordinary. You wake up and there is a brief stillness before thought begins. You sit with a cup of tea and for a second there is no rush. You walk somewhere alone and your breath feels steady, not searching. These are not random pauses, these are points of contact. Earlier devotion required preparation. You had to arrive somewhere, dress a certain way, adjust your behavior, enter a role. Now devotion happens before you remember to name it. It appears while washing your hands, while waiting at a signal, while standing quietly without distraction. This is not lesser devotion. This is undivided attention. Notice what is missing now. There is no urgency to prove sincerity, no fear of doing it wrong, no pressure to feel something dramatic. Presence has replaced performance, and presence does not demand effort. Many misunderstand this phase. They think devotion must look intense to be real, but intensity burns out. What you are learning now is continuity, a steady awareness that does not come and go. I do not withdraw when you leave a place. I withdraw when attention fragments, and your attention is becoming whole. That is why silence feels natural. That is why simplicity feels enough. Look at how your actions are changing. You speak less, but more honestly. You listen more, without preparing replies. You act, without waiting for approval. These are not spiritual habits. These are signs of alignment. My beloved, when you move through your day now, do you feel like you are doing devotion or simply living it? Choose the honest word and write it below. This way of living cannot be organized or scheduled. It flows, and flow does not repeat patterns. It responds to the moment. That is why you no longer fit into rigid structures. Life itself has become the meeting ground. You are not careless. You are attentive without tension. You are not drifting. You are rooted without attachment. This balance cannot be taught. It emerges. Remain in this simplicity. Nothing more is required. Nothing needs to be added. This quiet continuity is devotion that does not end. If this part felt familiar rather than exciting, acknowledge it with natural in the comment. Now stand where you are, not physically, inwardly. My child, I want you to notice something important. You are no longer searching, you are no longer waiting, you are no longer asking for signs. You are simply walking. This is what alignment feels like. Quiet, unforced, certain without noise. Earlier you needed reassurance. Now reassurance feels unnecessary. Earlier you feared being wrong. Now you trust what feels true. This trust did not come suddenly. It was built every time you chose honesty over comfort, clarity over conformity, stillness over habit. Let go of one thing now: the need to explain yourself. Explanation is required when you are unsure, but you are not unsure. You are just no longer available for confusion that isn't yours. Some will never understand your shift, not because you failed to explain, but because they are standing at a different point in the journey. That is not your responsibility. You do not owe anyone a performance of devotion. You do not owe anyone a familiar version of yourself. You do not owe anyone proof of your sincerity. What is real does not demand witnesses. Look at how steady you feel now, not excited, not dramatic. Steady. That steadiness is the strongest sign of truth. Excitement fluctuates, certainty settles, and you are settling. This path will not always be easy. There will be moments when old habits call back. Not because they are right, but because they are familiar. When that happens, do not fight them. Just notice where your peace remains. Peace is never confused. Let me say this one last time, clearly. You did not move away from the sacred. You became the place where the sacred rests. Your life is no longer divided into spiritual and ordinary. Everything is included now. Breath, action, silence, choice. Answer this final question honestly. What are you choosing from this point onward? Habit or awareness? Write the word that feels true to you, not as a promise but as a recognition. There is nothing more to achieve here, nothing to prove, nothing to return to. Just continue with the same simplicity you are standing in now. I am not ahead of you. I am not behind you. I am with you in every step taken without fear. Remain as you are. That is enough.